thank you so much for joining us again today on this fabulous chat about empty to earnings. And what are we talking about over here? Smart tenant selection strategies, how to maximize occupancy in your commercial property. My name's Mish Daniel, and I am with the lovely Melissa Fisher, who I am going to introduce you to in a minute. We are going to be answering a couple of questions that you often ask us as an audience, and that is, what strategies can I use to put the right tenants in my properties? What kind of incentives can we use to attract and retain quality tenants? And how can I adapt my commercial property to align with market demands? With all that said, I'd like to introduce you to the lovely Melissa Fisher. Melissa is a property developer, author, podcast host, founder of a property platform. Melissa, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. And do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Mish, and thanks for having me. I'm very, very grateful, very excited to be having this conversation with you, that's for sure. So yes, I am a property developer. I love what I do. Yes, I'm an author and podcast host and all those things. I have multiple businesses. More than anything, I love doing what I do. I love working with people. I coach, so I very much enjoy being able to help other people reach their goals and outcomes that they're striving for. I have a longer history in business that I care to actually admit, because that gives away age at times. But I'm business owner by nature, so very big on the business aspect, on the business side of things as well.
Awesome. Well, I think it's an absolute gift having you with us today, because I know you are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to all of this kind of stuff. Let's jump in and let's start talking about vacancies. It's always at the forefront of everybody's mind when thinking about commercial properties. You know, a lot of people wonder about what is critical to maximizing occupancy for properties. So, what would you say, in your opinion, would be critical to getting the best tenants, the good tenants, into those properties and in ensuring steady streams of income?
It's a really good question, Mish, and I agree with you. It's something people very commonly ask, and I think for a long time it was really ignored. For me, from a very standing start, I say to people, what's really critical is never take a tenant in out of desperation. Okay, because generally we will end up with the wrong tenant, not just for ourselves and our property, but for them and their situation. And while we're looking at creating great tenancies and great tenant mix, if it's out of desperation, we've missed the whole point of what we're trying to achieve. And you're locked and loaded with that. I will also say to people, just understand the value that your tenant brings. So while we're looking at that, your tenant is one of your biggest assets. We look at the property itself, but your tenant is the biggest asset. So really take the time to work through, is this the right tenant for me? And am I the right place for that particular tenant? What are they going to be able to leverage from being in this position? And then how do they work in with my other tenants? So we're constantly growing together, not just as an isolated business or an isolated asset. For me, they're the fundamentals. Have a relationship with them. Don't treat them as just a part of numbers. Actually form some form of relationship. And I've had quite a few clients that say, Melissa, I just don't have the time to do that. And I'm very respectful of that. If you've got a good manager, make sure they do, because that relationship is integral. It is so important for the longevity of the tenant remaining and the value of your asset moving forward.
Couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely couldn't agree with you more. I was having a conversation with one of my clients recently, and I said to them, you know, once you purchase the property, the most important thing is, what do you do afterwards? How do you deal with, you know, with your tenants afterwards going forward? Because the relationship doesn't stop there. You don't think they're just going to pay into your account on autopilot and expect, you know, you need to be checking in. And it's absolutely one of the key issues is having, as you said, you hit the nail on the head, management, the right person communicating with them, managing them, you know, managing the property, ensuring that they're happy where they are and that all their needs are being, you know, covered off.
There's nothing worse than having a tenant that's not happy and you not knowing about it. So as your property manager, you need to have that great relationship and that trust with them that if something's not right, they're actually going to come back and say, hey, we need to deal with this if they're not comfortable making that decision. I would hate to think that we had tenants that weren't happy and that needed some assistance or help in some way, shape or form, and we didn't know about it. So for me, I will always say property is a people game. So be very conscious of the relationships that you're building as you move forward. We put a tenant in place quite a few years ago now, and it's quite funny because 5, 6, 7 years later, they are still doing things for us. They're still referring us to other tenants for different locations, and the relationship just consistently builds over time. It doesn't stop when you sign that lease.
Absolutely, and it's very much like a partnership. I always look at the tenants and say, this is a partnership. Yes, you might own the structure, but those people that are driving your structure and paying your rent, they're your partners, they're your business partners. Look after them, cherish them.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
So let's talk a little bit about tenancy mix. So let's say shopping centres, for instance, or commercial industrial centres. What do you feel about tenancy mix? I mean, I'm just throwing 2 assets out there. But
that's okay. So done both, do both, love them all. Tenancy mix is something I think from the very beginning, what I look at personally is what's the theme? We can't just go in and throw a whole heap of nothing somewhere and expect that it's going to work. You've got to have some sort of theme behind it. If we're looking at an area, I say, is it family orientated? What's the theme that's going on in the peripheral? What's actually happening out there? And then how do we bring that in so it works from an internal perspective with our tenants as well? Little industrial hubs are great. And one thing that I love looking at industrial for is the people that actually go there. How have we created convenience for them? Our tire service, are we walking distance to the hairdressers or the beauty salons and these sort of places? Because if mum's dropping the kids off, dropping her car off, can she spend those couple of hours doing the things that she wants to do? She's not concerned about, oh my gosh, now I've got to sit here for 3 hours, wait for my car. There's no hire cars, there's no loan cars. Like, create the convenience. Really stop and give some thought to, if I have this particular business as my anchor, what else leverages from that, brings other traffic in as well, that creates the vibrancy that everyone can actually utilize. I have a client at the moment who bought a little shopping center with 12 shops in it. And it works very nicely to be able to sit down and just map it out. Don't have the rush behind it. If we have a baker, who goes with a baker? Who actually brings other traffic into an area that the other shops get to leverage from? So much of this is just about the stop and think. It's not hard, but if you don't have the time, again, go to the right people that can actually map this out for you and say, there's no point in having a shoe shop and then having the mechanics there. It's not a great fit. They're not the same sort of foot traffic. One thing I've learned over time, Mish, which was integral to all of this, and probably more so shopping centres than anything, and especially in our current climate, is making sure that in amongst our tenant mix, we always have tenancies that people have to turn up and walk in that door, that they can't click and collect, they can't get it online, they can't do it any other way but walk through the door, because while they're there doing that, so to pick up their prescription, maybe it's the fact that they go into the butcher's, because this brings traffic to an area. It literally brings people to the doorstep of some of those other shops. We used to look at the big tenancies, our big national tenants, as our greatest assets. And don't get me wrong, they still are, but they need some assistance now from some of those smaller businesses to actually start bringing people back to shops. Of what we've been through COVID and click and collect, online shopping, and all of these things that are compounding, these guys are putting so much time and effort into how do we get people back on the ground again. We go, it's simple. You start leveraging off the little guys, right? Because people still have to turn up to pick up their meat.
Absolutely.
People still have to turn up to do their pathology and things like this. It's a really smart mix of what's my starting position. If my starting position is making sure I have people coming to a door, what do those doors look like? Like, what can people not order online? What can they not have delivered to their home? Start there and then build the theme around it. Medical's a great one. Medical is very good for it. And who likes to be by medical? You create that theme and sort of like move out from that. There are great synergies. I think the best tool for anyone that I say costs you nothing except some time is go and talk to them. I will always ask my tenants, who would you like to see next door? If you had your way, if it was your choice, next door is going to work best for you.
Absolutely. And what type of business would support your business?
Absolutely.
What kind of businesses can you collaborate with that work incredibly well? I always look at that like beauty, for instance. If you've got a hairdressing salon, it's fabulous. Have an eyebrow tinting next door, with facials on the other side or nails on the one side. So you have all of these supporting businesses, and the clients go from one to the other to the other. They're all supporting each other, You
have a nice little play group or something that entertains the kids, and mum's there all day. She's very happy. It's a day out. Kids are looked after. There's some food and beverage on the other side over there because you've got to have lunch, and it works. It actually works for people, and the businesses become quite close-knit.
Yeah.
The other thing to remember is businesses don't like shifting. They don't like to move address. It's very difficult for a business to pack up and shift their address when they have a client base, and people gravitate to them. So they don't want to go. So I say make it possible, make it exciting for them to stay, create that vibrancy with the businesses that support them. And you've got a great asset there for a long time.
Yeah. So the market has changed quite a lot over the last couple of years. And the last couple of years I'm talking about since 2019, 2020. And a lot of businesses probably closed down over that period. A lot of businesses have reopened or popped up again, but there's been a huge shift in the market and the demand. Have you seen that? What do you think? Where do you think those shifts are? And you've mentioned a couple. You've touched on them.
There's been some huge shifts, and I can go back prior to that point in time and say it was happening. There was shifts going on that we weren't really taking enough notice of or leveraging enough. So this point in time where it was made very clear to us that things are going to be done differently, it created some great opportunities. It definitely changed the behaviour of our shoppers. It changed the behaviour of how business as a whole operates. Now, a lot of it was very challenging, and it's taken its toll on some industries, and probably some industries more than others. Needless to say, it's affected business full stop. Now, I say it's created opportunities. It's created some great collaboration. What I have seen is space getting used differently. Right? One of the big realizations, and it probably came more so from a now we're very conscious of where we're spending money. We have way too much space. Do we need all the space that we have at the moment? Can we sublease that out to other people? Can we have a lease by the hour scenario for working space? What does that actually look like? I know Melbourne's office space got hurt. It was terrible. And it still is. But the thing is, it's being able to look at that and say, okay, yes, we were probably wasteful on space. We were getting a little bit complacent with how we operated. We had the luxury of being able to do that. But now it's time to give thought to how do we do it differently, and what do we need, and how do we support our workers? We've realised that we don't all have to be in the office all the time. It came with challenge because not everyone is self-motivated. So there are some challenges that go with that. But what do we do with our asset? For anyone that owned multiple office spaces, what's actually happening there? And so, well, some great conversions came off it. There's an opportunity to look at it and say, what else can it be used for? And I think it's the one question that people don't ask enough is what else? What else can I actually do? If I'm going to be flexible here and I don't need all of this space now, but I'm locked into a lease, can I sublease? Can I sublease? Can I bring my business partner's wife's business in here as well. Like, who do we need to speak to, and what does that look like from a collaborative perspective? I'll say for most people, you could look at the Maya scenario. And so I just say it's a great reference to collaboration for businesses. They're all under one roof. They all support each other. The traffic is there. Everyone shops. Everyone wins out of it. And it is a small space for many, many people. We're just doing the same with office space at the moment. We're doing the same with a lot of business space. Hospitality was hit very hard. They realized how to do things differently. They can bring in, and a beautiful scenario of this is a barbershop. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. So the guys can sit in the bar and have a drink. The bar calls out their number. You're up, my friend. In we come. Okay, so get a haircut. I was thinking it was just a really smart decision to make when we start looking at the challenges around we're not bringing in the same amount of business. Behaviors have changed. How do we look at this differently and be a little bit creative, giving consideration to who else in the industry is hurting, and then how can I actually work with them? Flexibility is huge. There's so many people that look at and I do have a great example of the daytime, nighttime scenario.
Yes.
We can look at leases and say leases should be a percentage of your overall revenue, and it varies per industry. If we go back to the basics of that and say, okay, so what do I need to look at differently? Who can use my space when I'm not here? What does that look like for them? Does that save them money as well? So it goes away from being all about us and being to who else needs a little bit of support. Who can I work with? I've got to be honest, Mish, some of the younger generations are doing this so well.
Oh, they are. And I think the younger generations actually do it better than the older generations. In fact, it's so interesting you were talking about hospitality, because I had the good fortune of being at a restaurant a couple of months back. And there was something that just eluded me to asking the question. And the question was, is the restaurant open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And they said, no, the restaurant is open for breakfast and lunch, but then we pack up and somebody else comes in and does dinner. Because I saw signage that looked slightly different, and I was wondering what is the signage and how does it work? So it's really interesting. They have a shared restaurant, two owners. The one runs breakfast and lunch, and the other one runs dinner. Totally different.
You know what? And that is just so smart. This is where we get down to collaboration versus competition.
Yes.
This is bringing who we would have seen as competition in our front door and saying, let's work together. Absolutely amazing opportunities. So two businesses get to thrive. That's an incredible situation. And the property owner gets their lease paid, so they're happy as well. There's like win-win-wins going on here.
Win-wins all the way. Yeah.
Very smart way of doing things. The economic uncertainties are really interesting. I say it's very smart feasibilities. It's giving consideration to making sure that we have plan A, plan B, plan C. And I say right up front, start looking at what else. Multiple income streams. If you only have one income stream coming in off your property, that hurts. When things change, that hurts. And it creates that pressure where we become reactive instead of being able to stop and think through the opportunities or the changes we need to make. So even if you're to buy an asset that technically in its form only has the ability to generate one income stream, I still say, what else can we do? How can we turn this into multiple income streams where you are never in a situation where there's not some form of income coming in for you? It creates enough breathing space when things change to slow it down, rethink what we need to do. How can we use it differently? How can we change a use? And create a better outcome again, or how can I support my tenant under this situation where I still have another income stream coming in? So that one for me is very, very important. And I know we talk about offices and these sort of things, but there are ways that we can create multiple income streams out of any property.
So with regards to creating those multiple income streams, let's just talk a little bit about office, because a lot of people ask me about office. How can they change office space to something else? Now, I mean, there is the change of use, there's regulations around it, there's all that kind of things, and you kind of touched on a little bit earlier, where, and we know, huge office space, let's say, rents at a nominal fee. The minute you start chopping it up into smaller space, and if you're renting it by the hour, and the smaller you're chopping it, the higher your rental, right? So as a property owner, you can actually be quite creative about that by going to your tenant and say, hey, listen, are you using all your space? Is it functional? Is it economically viable for you? Giving those ideas, sharing those ideas with them, bringing other parties in, parties that actually do small space rentals. We've actually done that a little bit as well. And it really works. It helps the tenant because now they're not paying a big chunk of rent, and it's shared in its collaboration.
Absolutely. And I sort of said a little bit earlier, we were very complacent. And I say, when I say we, I say as a whole, businesses were complacent on the amount of space they could have. It was affordable, there was no big issues. And then you have a massive, massive change, and all of a sudden it's brought to attention, all of this excess space. And then how can it be used differently? And you're absolutely on the money there, Mish, with the smaller you cut this up, the more it's worth per square meter, the better the outcome is going to be, the more people you can actually support getting into a space and being able to operate independently. And then you have a great win off the back of it, multiple income streams. You've got income coming back in again. It works for everyone. So be proactive, though. Go out there and speak to managing agents and say, have you got any clients, any tenants that are really struggling with where they are, that their leases are coming up for a renewal? Can we work with them? Can we support them in some smaller space? Is their lease written with some the sublease potential in it? So don't be afraid to talk to these people and offer it as a service, as an ability that you have to generate a better outcome for other tenants.
Yeah, absolutely. And property management as well. I mean, go out there and do a hunt and a search. Who rents out small spaces? What platforms? Because there are heaps of platforms now that rent out those smaller spaces. Property management, commercial agents themselves, they'll jump into that and, get creative about which spaces you can.
A good commercial agent, and they are gold. They are absolute gold to work with. It's phenomenal. You create that working relationship. They will give you projects that require that kind of work to be done. And you will keep being able to do it. You increase your percentage return off your asset for every one that you do, and you've got an agent bringing them to you consistently. They're happy. They get what they want. Again, you've supported tenants. It's an amazing situation to be in.
It is. There's always a way. I had an old business partner, an old Jewish business partner, many, many, many years ago, and he always said to me, Mish, if you have a product, you'll always have buyers.
It's true. It's very true. And you always have those that attitude around good relationships. You'll always have a good team behind you as well.
There we go. That's key. Completely. So, Melissa, with regards finding the right tenant, getting the right tenant in, how do you know whether the tenant is right, stable, whether they're going to be the right mix, whether they're going to, whether they're going to add value or, detract from value of your property?
So if we're sitting there and let's just say we're going to buy a nice little group of shops or a small shopping centre, I say first, before you actually go out and look, create that scope of what you're looking for. What actually works from a tenant mix perspective? Start getting those juices flowing to start off with. Let's go through that process before we're in a due diligence period where all of a sudden we're now got time constraints. So right at the very beginning, start thinking about it. You've engaged, and you may have engaged buyers agents, or you may be out there looking yourself. Whatever the case is, you finally come up with this amazing opportunity. And we've got a group of tenants going, this is fantastic. As a tenant mix, amazing. How do we know they're the right tenant? Okay, so financially, we want to make sure that their business is stable, that they have longevity in it, and they have a future plan. So they've actually built in progress for growth. If I don't see that someone's got a growth mindset in their business, it's a conversation that we need to have, because we know from a commercial perspective, their rent's going up every year. Electricity, all the other things that we use, it goes up every year. If we haven't factored this into our business model, it's going to hurt, and it's going to hurt quite quickly. So the absolute conversations we want to have, and being very respectful that they're a business owner and a business operator. And we always go in with the intention of making them feel very comfortable in the conversation. But we do want to make sure that we're telling them too, this is for our good and for your good. I need to know that if I'm bringing you in, I'm not putting you in a situation that's going to be detrimental to your business. That your business can afford this and sustain it for a length of time, because that's my responsibility from the very beginning, and that it supports our asset. So I have no problems in asking a tenant coming in to be able to demonstrate the last couple of years worth of business success. And then can we just have a conversation, or can you demonstrate your growth model moving forward? Now, this does not say I won't work with a tenant that can't show 3 or 4 years in business. We've had startups come in. Let's just talk about the process. I was
going to ask you, yeah.
Let's talk, because there's risk orientation. And if we're talking tenant mix, we can get to a point where we know that we can put someone in that may be a little bit riskier, but it supports a startup. And this is important moving forward as well. We want to make sure that we're actually supporting new businesses and new ideas, and we're not actually pushing that out to the side saying it's not for us. Where we can bring them in, we certainly will. But again, we want to make sure that they're in the right mindset of how it actually works. Yeah. So whilst we can support them, they're actually getting into that situation that they have worked through it enough, understand business enough, their target markets, the area they're shifting into, their area demographics, so that it does mesh, that they have a solid understanding on how that works from a business level. I've had to sit down with a few tenants and say, okay, let's bring a few other factors in. There's a couple of missing things here from a business perspective that you may not have thought about. Where do you sit with that? Some of them just aren't proficient in being able to explain their thought process around their business growth. So I'd certainly don't eliminate people off the back of documents that are provided. Personally, I like to have that conversation, or pay a great agent to have those face-to-face conversations with them. Like I said before, businesses don't want to shift. The last thing I want to do is be seeing businesses shift into a premises that doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
And it is a respectful conversation.
Yeah.
We can certainly go to the outskirts first with references, and do a little bit of research around the stability of their business before we engage in those conversations. At that level, we've done a little bit of research to say, yes, these are the best pick. Let's have some conversations with them. It's the start of forming really good relationships.
And I think it's you're building up those win-win relationships where everybody feels as if they are benefiting from, they get a sense that you're there to help them. That you're not the landlord that's just going to be grabbing their rental and running off into the hills, and beating them over the head. And when COVID hits or hard times hit, that you're not going to be there. You want to be supportive of their business. And like I said earlier, they want to see you. You want to make sure that they know that you're there to be their business partner, really, in that instance.
You want to build enough trust with that tenant that when something's not right, they will say so, that they're not going to wait until the last minute till it's no longer repairable.
And the only way you do that is communications, constant communications.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very, very key. Very key. So let's discuss incentives, okay? Because there's quite a wide range of incentives that we can do. I know I can sometimes pull handbrakes on incentives where necessary, but on the other hand, you got to give to get. Okay, so let's go through a couple of incentives. What are your best incentives?
Okay, so right up front, I first will look at if who's coming in. So what kind of fit out are they looking for? What is their fit out cost from an industry perspective generally look like? Because if they have a reasonable fit out, then generally I can work with them to potentially put something towards their fit out as an incentive for them to come in. Now, I never, ever pay for a full fit out for a tenant. I make sure that they have contributed to their fit out, because when they do, they are invested in the property. And then we know they're going to be there for a long time. But I'm happy to support that, because generally I can get the materials at a wholesale price, and we're looking at what that retail cost is to them. So that means I can actually give them more for the same price as what they would get if they were doing it themselves. So we can actually create a lot better benefit for them just by the fact that we get wholesale pricing and they're doing it from a retail perspective. So that works exceptionally well. What they see is they're getting a lot more from us than what they'd be able to deliver themselves. The other thing I'll do is a rent-free period. And a couple of years ago, I worked with a client at the time, and we had to work through a lot of lease incentives. And we say some work for some industries better than for others. This particular one, we had given a 6-month free rent incentive. Now, it was a very sizable lease that was being signed up. And the 6 months was a period of that was for them actually to get in there, get the infrastructure set up properly, and then be able to start generating trade to be able to afford the rent. Now, whilst they'd run all the business models, we said, listen, in preference to 6 months free rent, what we're going to do is, because I'm not going to drop the rent on my lease because that drops the value of my asset, I'm just going to spread that over a 12-month period for you. Because when you go from nothing back into rent, that's a very big jump out of your cash flow. I want to ease you into this. I want to make it possible from a new business to be able to month on month be able to pay what's affordable, so you don't get to a point where it hurts.
That's a great incentive. That's a really, really great way of looking at it.
So we look at the financial aspect of it, but again, I'm getting back to that: support the business, support them to do well while you're actually talking to them at this level. They've got a lot of comfort then around being able to work with you, and it takes away from that. They have to have their chasing more. This just went down to a great agreement. They were super excited about it. It works exceptionally well. So yes, there are a lot of incentives that we can offer, but it really is an individual business thing. It really is relevant to each individual tenant coming in, what their financial needs are, the status of their business. If they're a long-standing business, they may not necessarily be chasing new clientele as they're going, I need time to set up my fit out. So I just need a couple of months to actually get in and play around with it. And so it's really hearing what it is their needs are.
And I think you touched on it there. And again, it's the relationship that you're building up at every single, I always say to my clients, every single tenant is different. They've got different requirements, different ways of thinking, different backgrounds, whatever. They're going to see their businesses totally differently to the next person in the next shop or warehouse or wherever, and it's a matter of you just tapping into them and seeing what is comfortable, what works for them and what works for you.
Absolutely
comes back to relationships.
It always will. We see property's that people game. So it's not a computer game, it's a people game. So get out there, have the conversations. Don't discount things like signage or a nice little splash of paint out the front for them, something like that. Again, it's have the conversation and listen to what they're saying.
Listen to what they're wanting. Big thing. We've just done something very recently with our solicitor on lease agreements. And I think this is absolutely key, because while you're busy going through all of these negotiations, you'd go through your heads of agreement, and all of this is absolutely key, that it needs to be in your negotiations on your heads of agreement. And do not try and do this without a solicitor.
Absolutely not. Hands down, I totally agree. I'm always very concerned when someone says they're going to do a very stock standard lease and it's like, no, thank you. I would never take on a lease nor a contract without our lawyers looking at it. I'm not a lawyer. I say, yes, we can have great negotiations. We can come up with amazing agreements. But for the good of all, we say where everything is great till something goes wrong. So make sure that your lawyers have actually gone over it and assessed it, and everything is dotted and crossed for everyone's benefit.
And also, I don't know about you, but when I'm dealing with people, I say to them, listen, we are going to have this this conversation that is going to work for you and it's going to work for us, but please make sure you use a lawyer too. You know, you want to know what your legal rights are, so that it's 100% open. And if you think about it, a lot of people think that a lease is one-sided. I always say no. A
Not.
lease is not one-sided. A lease is an agreement that we are looking at in the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, and how is this going to roll out? What works for you? What works for us? Let's make that. Let's get divorced before we get married.
Absolutely. It's a great analogy, actually. And it really is, because if you can put apart at that level, right at the very beginning, if you pull everything apart and ask all the questions, as you move forward, it's easy. It's already thought of, it's spoken about. There's nothing uncomfortable. There's nothing that's going to come out of left that you haven't already had a discussion around. So you are absolutely on it with it is an agreement, and it is two-sided, not one-sided.
Correct, and really, really important. Throw all the you know, I want to say all the bad eggs into that basket and wrestle them out and find out exactly where their boundaries are and where your boundaries are, and come to an agreement. It really is the most important agreement.
I totally agree with you. I think it's one of the most important conversations you're ever going to have when you're going into a property deal, is being able to have that level of conversation with someone, and be comfortable about it. There's nothing wrong with having that conversation and asking those questions up front. I think it's very supportive of a good relationship.
And it's a great sort of icebreaker in learning about your tenants, where their boundaries are, and you know, into the future things are going to come up. You're going to have conversations with them about issues. Now you know more or less how to deal with it and how to deal with them. You know, it gives you that good, you know, just a sort of a leapfrog into forming your relationships, building those relationships.
Definitely. Totally agree. Totally.
Melissa, now I know that you are really, really good at change of use. Okay. Um, so tell us a little bit about what sort of things, where are the sticking points when you're looking at a building and you're wanting to do change of use?
First thing I'm always going to go to. So, and before I even look at the area dynamic or demographics, I just want to go to the zoning and say, what does it allow me to do? What is this zone actually? Where are the limitations around it? One of the greatest unknowns for a lot of people is what you can actually do in various different zonings. There is a lot more than what we care to believe, and have some good solid conversation with whether it be an independent town planner. If you've got a good relationship with the local council, go on and have a chat with them about what some of the definitions actually do mean. Because when you have a solid understanding of a zoning, then you can start looking at how else a structure can actually be used. Because this is the reality. I say this from a once it's a pub, it's not always a pub scenario, because just because that's what it was doesn't mean to say it's what it's always going to be. It is just a structure. How are we going to use it? So what are my limitations? And the zoning will be our biggest limitation. And it's not that limiting, to be perfectly honest. Okay, so that is the first place I'm going to go. I'm going to understand what we can actually do. Also understanding this as a council by council, state by state scenario. So don't get caught in that I know, so I'm not going to check when I move into a different area. Okay. Yeah, when you go into a different area, you ask all of those same questions again, go through the same process, allow yourself to relearn it so you actually know with clarity what can be done, because this now allows you to start getting creative with the use. We can start looking at what has been the change in this area. If that no longer works as what it is now, what's been the change? Has the age group changed coming in? Has the overall cultural dynamic changed? What do we need to look at now to say, who is our target market? And what do we want to deliver to them? What is missing in this area where we can actually deliver a different outcome? And can I put it in this structure?
And I think the great thing is go and find out if there's a chamber of commerce, if there's a Is there a council that are busy looking at doing developing, and council is a fantastic place to start, because they'd refer you to a couple of specialists who are busy working on various different projects. You can tap into those projects, you can tap into those people to find out what is required in that area. What is the biggest demand that you can go and facilitate,
I would
solve the problem.
I would tell you the most underutilized part of council is their economic section. So for every developer that goes, I'm going to go and speak to the planners, or go to the manager of planning, or the planning director. And just before you go there, go and have a chat with the economic director. Go and have a chat with the economic team, because what they will tell you is where people go to shop outside of their council. What are they going for? Why are they leaving here? And when you know why people are leaving here, you can go, can I actually bring that into this area, my structure now, and keep people in this town? Now, when you are having that conversation with the economic section of a council, do you think that they're going to support you if they believe that you are going to be able to fill that gap, or you're even interested in working with them? Believe me, they start heading you in some amazing directions to be able to get that information. So if you have a relationship at all with any council at any level, do yourself a favor, just go and check in with them, make an appointment, have a conversation around what is needed in this area, what businesses are missing, and what it means for them, because they spend a lot of time and a lot of money on doing that research. And they also already have the statistics around the jobs that are created off the back of different businesses and the money that it brings back into that council. So they can give you a nice, tidy list and a few little reports that are going to support some of your choices as well.
And what you've just said over there is research, because probably one of the most expensive things to do is to do research. And council have got the budget and they've already done it. So go and tap into it. And they're more than happy to hand that over to you and to work with you.
Of course they are. And when you can demonstrate that you want to work with them, this is that collaboration again. It's the relationships again. And like you said, Mish, they've already done it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to go out and redo this. We can certainly work with them. And when you are doing something that they agree with, that they like, do you think you're going to get their support off the planning side as well? Most likely.
Hell yes, if you're doing what they're wanting, they're most definitely going to be assisting you wherever they can, really. So make them your friends. I know a lot of people, and I know in development, we always say, oh, dealing with council is the worst. But, you just got to find that one person in council that can help you through, put you in the right direction. Happy days, off you go.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
So let's talk a little bit about cost analysis, the actual renovation, stacking up. Is your renovation going to give you the reward that you're putting into it? Your view on that?
So one of the biggest challenges I've ever seen is people come at residential renovators coming into the commercial space. They come in and they go, we want to fluff this up. We want to make it look good. We want to hold on a sec. Is that money actually making you money? So it's very, very easy to overcapitalize. And as you shift from asset class to asset class, so maybe from industrial into retail or hospitality, even office space, we want to reset again, because the last thing we want to do is spend money where it's not going to serve us and it's not going to serve our tenants. So I am a firm believer, and I have an amount of experience in it too, so it probably makes me a lot more comfortable with it, of being able to have those discussions with tenants before I renovate. So I would rather have a potential tenant come in and have a look as a blank canvas. And then let's talk about the fit out. Let's talk about what they are going to need, what it looks like for them. Because if I'm going to spend money, I want to know that it's going to make me money. And realistically, from a commercial perspective, I say as long as we have a nice clean canvas to work with, then everything then should be able to bring us in $1, whether it's signage, whether it's internal fit out, whether it's landscaping out the front. I want to make sure that it serves the purpose of the people going in there, and still creating that nice, modern, progressive look. There's nothing worse than overcapitalizing on something and then saying, well, I've got to do it again in 2 years' time or 3 years' time.
Yeah. There's renovating and there's renovating. I mean, we've had a couple of clients in buildings before that a client moves out and the building is bright green, neon green, whatever. Um, and it's like, oh, it's an eyesore to attract another tenant in there. They see it and they go, oh, what can we do about this? So, at best, I'll say, look, spend a little bit of money and just clean it up. Give it a blank canvas so that it looks good. It's eye candy because I mean, realistically, you eat with your eyes before you eat with your mouth. So
Absolutely.
make it look good, but keep it blank. Give it a blank canvas so that prospective tenants can come in and say, oh, okay, what can I do with this warehouse? Or, oh, gee, that would be the most amazing warehouse to put my business in. And we're not, they're not starting off on a 20% sort of, not too sure.
Absolutely.
People
Couldn't
don't
agree
have the
more.
imagination. So in terms of spending, yes, spend that kind of money,
I totally agree. Could not agree more on that one. I just quickly, quite a few years ago now, I bought a group of shops, and I do laugh because as we were walking around at the auction, I'm listening to people going, oh my God, there's so much money to spend on this. It's horrendous. It's God ugly. Now, to be honest with them, one of them was bright orange shop and the other one was bright green. So that was a flashback when you mentioned that, which is quite funny. So when we're buying, definitely give consideration to these things. It's just a paint job. It's not the end of the world. But when you're presenting it to a tenant, yes, definitely, we want that nice blank canvas. And then we can work with them. I say, realistically, if I'm going to bring a tenant in or an agent is bringing a tenant in, we want to get to that technology. Pinterest is incredible. Give them some ideas. Have a look at this. And if we've done a little bit of research on the tenants we're bringing through, we know their industry, we know what they do. We can show them some great ideas because if we're going to invest in their fit out, we want to be able to say, hey, let's have a look at this. What works for you? Start getting them thinking, get those creative juices excited as they're talking to you because we want them coming in. At this point, we want them signing that lease.
I love what you said about those garish brown and green shops because I've for the I don't know how many years I've always said I love ugly. Bring me ugly all day. I love ugly. I started doing renovations in residential, and I can't tell you how many times I just went looking for ugly.
Yes, I totally agree. Very interesting, isn't it? How it's a deterrent for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But when you know what to do and the value difference that you can create, ugly is gold every day. Just one quick point on tenants exiting too, especially if they've done bright green. Any of that, there should be a make good clause in your lease as well. Be really conscious of this when we're saying to them, yep, we're happy to sign off on your fit out and these are all the things you can have, that you definitely have that make good clause at the back end that gets rid of a bright red or green wall or something along the lines of something else to have discussions with about them up front so they understand the implications at the back end that they're actually going to have to bring that back to maybe white or even a lighter version.
It's a great point, and it's often and it kind of takes me down another little rabbit hole that I don't want to go down right now, but I'm going to mention to to the listeners with regards that make good clause. It's tied into your bond. It's tied into your deposit because often what happens, you get to the end of the lease and the tenant goes, whoop, okay, I'm out of here. You can have my bright green walls and my orange floors and whatever. And you go, hey, hang on, wait a minute. There's a make good clause in there. You can do it. Otherwise, I can do it and I can use your deposit in order to do. So that deposit, I often get asked how important it is. Well, that's one of the many importance, but we'll do that another time.
Very important. It's a very good point. Very good point.
So, Melissa, we've got a couple of case studies that you very kindly have sent through to us. Do you want to walk us through your case studies? Whoops, I've got too quickly.
Very, very, very happy to. So the office Airbnb to an apartment. So this was in Melbourne. It was a client that I had quite a few years ago now. They were locked into a lease and the lease was super expensive. That had a shift in their business at the time. And they were looking at ways that they could improve from a business perspective, their lease to revenue ratio was way out of whack. It wasn't working for them. Like I said, a small shift in business, so we had to get into the creative, what can we do? Now, the landlord was relentless. There was no way the landlord was going to give them an inch at all. They said, I don't care. That point in time in Melbourne too, there was a good demand for it. So they said, we don't care, you're paying your lease or you're out. They had just rebranded and they were bringing in a lot of new clients. So shifting address was not something that they wanted at the time either. So what we ended up doing was, it was a huge space. So we went through the lease and we said, okay, there's no reason why we can't actually look at doing this. Let's have a chat with the landlord again. And we converted some of the space into an apartment. Now, it was Melbourne, it was short stay scenario, worked exceptionally well. They made very, very good money out of this. So they went from being in a situation that was financially challenging from a cash flow perspective to now saying, well, this has worked well. I wonder if we just shift it out to something more affordable, because this is a long lease. If I shift it to something more affordable, can I turn the other half into Airbnb as well? We can make more money than what our lease is actually going to cost us in another location. And I said, let's get back to the branding side. We didn't want to shift because we didn't want to move address. Mm-hmm. And they said, we can just use the downstairs box. It's still an address. Our mail will still get delivered to that. When we're talking to clients, we're on the phone to them. So we can tell them this is our new location. Our postal address didn't have to change. And I said, all right, well, we tried this. We said, it's a short-term thing. So let's give it a test. Let's see how it works. It worked so well for them that the entire term of their lease was actually Airbnb. They took up the next option. They shifted to a new location. They kept the brand change going. They eventually moved their postal address over into a great location, great space. Everyone was happy. And they went on for 3 terms under that lease of it being Airbnb for them. So it was a little bit of a side gig in the end, just because it was so much more cash flow positive. But this was a big shift in perspective. And I say to people, simple changes sometimes, just being able to have either someone on your side that can say, hey, have you thought of this? Have you given consideration to? And even at the other end saying, hey, remember, this was an address scenario. The reason why we didn't want to leave was about our address. Are we okay with this? Yeah. To have someone else supporting you makes a very big difference when you're under pressure. Because we're going to be making reactive decisions, okay? Yeah. That generally ends up with a mess to clean up. So that was pretty important. Like I said, great little side gig in the end. They made extra money. They were in a great location. Happy days.
That's really, that's interesting. I mean, office to Airbnb, because what strikes me straight away is council, okay? Restrictions around office to Airbnb, because with Airbnb you need serviceability, you need services, bathrooms, so it must have been an office, an office that lent itself to having a multitude of plumbing services.
It was actually a nice city office space in Melbourne. It was on Collins Street. So beautiful location, and it was set up originally when it was set up for medical suites. Which was its very first use. So the plumbing situation in it was fantastic. So it very much lent itself to it, which is where we came up with the idea to start off with. And it's a very good point that you make. Go straight back to your zoning. 2 people to speak to in regards to this. Definitely council to understand that we are still within the legal requirements of where we are. And the other one is body corporate. If you're under a body corporate or an owner's corporate situation, then we must be having that conversation to make sure it is allowable use at the time, because not all body corporates will allow it. Now, if they say no, it doesn't mean no forever. I did have a client recently. I know I had a client recently where we said, listen, they were in a very challenging situation of a very heavily negative geared portfolio at the time. And they came to me with how do we fix this? What do we need to do? And Airbnb was one of the scenarios we went down. We had a look at it, and they hit that brick wall of we've just been told, no, we can't. So we said, all right, let's go back to them now with a nice little package of here's how we operate this. This is the all of the things that we do to ensure that there is no detriment to any of the other businesses or residents in this apartment block or that particular office block at the time. Let's demonstrate the full operation from start to finish, and let's ask for trial. Let's ask for 3 months. And if we can get 3 months and show them that it works and there's no complaints, and we have the legal requirements all ticked off, then if we can get a foot in the door and we can start, maybe if there are no issues, that they'll allow us to do this for a longer term. So he very successfully did it with 3 no's, 3-month trials. They were very okay, but he was very professional about what he put in front of them. We're operating a business here and we're going to ensure that everyone is successful off the back of this. 3-month trial, no complaints, no issues, managed well. Again, happy days. Turned his portfolio around, so it was a great end result. But you must be very, very careful about making sure you tick those boxes of regulation and rules, because if you don't, eventually it's gonna hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always going to come back and bite you in the bum.
Sorry.
It's all about compliance. Tick those boxes.
Absolutely. We cannot do anything that does not meet compliance. There's no excuse for it. There's no need for it. And it is eventually going to hurt you. So compliance is primary. This bottom one, the upstairs storage into a leased out office and meeting space. Again, quite interesting that you brought up the restaurant you went to. Same scenario. So these guys operated a very successful restaurant at night, very successful, but they didn't open up for breakfast or lunch. And again, that we looked at their financials, and this was exactly the same. It was their lease was out of proportion to their revenue. And again, we literally cannot bring any more bums on seats in a dinner service. So without having to put prices up, and we said, all right, let's look at our lease, which was a standout number because it was a prime location. And it's exactly what we did. They had a great upstairs space, which is an incredible space, but all they used it for was storage, and they had a computer in there for doing a little bit of their financial work. That was it. So we pulled it apart, decked it out nicely, put it out for lettable office space and meeting space, because it was on a high traffic, high demand street. In a heartbeat, filled it. Again, they turned what was a challenge into a high profit situation for them. We had to go back and check their lease, though, to make sure that they could do this within the terms of their lease. No problems. So a great end result for those guys, a great end result, a minimal dollars spent.
And it's unbelievable. I mean, as I go around having a look at properties, I see these spaces. I see wasted space all over the place. And I often think to myself, gee, what can we do with the space? How can we make it more creative? How can we, and it just requires the right type of person with the right imagination and the foresight to see, you know what, it's going to cost me $50K to do this, but realistically, how much is that going to add to my value? Big time.
Absolutely. I think if anyone's to allow themselves the time to do anything, it's get out there and walk some of the streets. Go and see what's happening, feel the vibrancy, feel what's going on, and then get a little bit creative and start either writing it down or drawing it out or whatever it is, talking it, recording it. What you see, some of the great ideas, some of the things that you think are visually appealing or bring a nice dynamic in, you can then start looking at, can I apply any of this to my own properties? How can I create that extra income? How can I support a tenant differently? This one is not mine, but I love it so much. I was so excited watching it unfold. The guys that did this just did it exceptionally well. They really did. They had turned what was an amazing old building, and it was a pub. It still has a pub aspect to it. However, in this town, there was a big shortage of good, clean, modern office space. It's exactly what they created with some really cool consulting suites upstairs. And they turned it into a very modern upstairs, very chic, modern area. While downstairs, it's a solid country pub. And they kept that feel about the downstairs of it. However, we talk about excess space and what is required and how we look at things differently. So they've brought in some retail, but the best thing that they did was kept some of the really, really good food and beverage, the good country pub offering down there, turned their bottle shop into a drive-through coffee shop, Now, they were very smart and maybe a little bit ahead of their time, because during COVID, they did drive-through Palmers for the workers at lunchtime, and it just didn't stop. It was just fantastic to see how very quickly they could turn what was a very big, open, unused space in a country pub, saying pubs aren't seen the same anymore. And they didn't want to just renovate and turn this into another pokies and another let's put a kids room in. What else can we do? So retail space.
This is amazing. This is really
just so good, because the amount of, when you've got a country pub, generally it's one lease and it's a fairly substantial lease on them. But to break this up into so many compartments and be able to look at an area and say, what does it actually need? Can we facilitate a majority of this? And what's that overarching theme? And be able to bring so much of it into one building and so successfully. I was excited. I was so in love with what they were doing as I was watching it unfold. I've chatted with them many times about it and said to them, the next time I find another country pub, because I love them, I said, I'll certainly be having a chat with you. It was just great. It was very strategic. They spent the time, they staged it so they could actually test and measure. A great result when you can stop, breathe, talk to the locals, get out there, see what's going on, and then strategically undertake the process. Amazing.
And I think and again, you said stop, breathe, see what the locals want, go out there, do your research, find out what is required in that area, and they facilitated a need. And that's what it's all about, facilitate that need. I've actually got a fabulous case study on our website of a client. It was a mentoring student that I had some time ago. This guy was really, really driven, and he was buying a property in a little town, sort of one of the grey areas up the Sunshine Coast, and a little ailing town that had quite a lot of vacancy in that. And he was really nervous about it. Anyway, I gave him a couple of ideas, and that, long story short, it was 4 tenancies that he turned into 2 tenancies. And I said, go door knocking, go and find out from people what is required, what is needed. Long story short, he bought this property. It was on the market for about 650. We negotiated, got it for about 400,000. He found out that the local doctors down the road had been bought out by an international consortium, and they were looking for bigger premises. And this was a tough negotiation. And he started going into this and saying, Mish, I don't think I can do this. And I said, oh, yes, you can. Oh, you go back in there and you do it. And we were talking about fit out earlier. And he came back and he said, they want $280,000 of fit out. I said, man, you put it in there because you're going to get that money back tenfold. Long story short, a year later, I mean, it wasn't quite a year, but probably about 8 or 9 months later, that property was reevaluated at 1.3 million.
Beautiful. I love it.
Isn't it amazing?
Love it.
And that was him being on the ground, doing the work, knocking on the doors, and he found out what is required. He found exactly what he needed. He made it happen. So there's the magic.
It absolutely is. It's very, very interesting. We can say Google tells us a lot now, but people tell us a lot more.
Oh, how?
and I look at these guys here in their pub and I say, it's just perfect. People are coming into the pub to have a drink. You're pouring them a beer, you're having a chat. You're talking about what's going on. We're not hiding this. We want to know. We want to communicate with our locals and things. It is. I just love that story, Mish. It's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I credit the guy for actually going back in there and doing it and having his back, because it's easy to go, oh no, I can't do this, because it gets challenging. It gets a little confronting at times. So to have you behind him would have been an absolute godsend at the time. But he deserved the reward that he got off the back end. He earned it.
He really, really worked for it. And I give him 100% kudos for that. I mean, I was just there pushing him, but he did the work. He actually did the work. I just steered him in the right direction. And like you, love helping people, love mentoring people, get the job done, just show them how to. But this is beautiful. I mean, I'm thinking all those people that are upstairs in their offices, lunchtime, where do they go? They go to the pub. It's reciprocal business.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is.
Fabulous.
Yep. Perfect.
we've covered so much, Melissa. I think we're going to have to break this podcast into 3 sections because we've covered so much. It's been so wonderful chatting to you. So if we have a look at some of our key takeaways over here, strategic tenant selection, absolute key, which we've
It
spoken
is.
about.
Relationships. I think
Yeah.
that one word that and I know you are very fond of that word as well, which is relationships. It's with your tenants themselves and then tenant to tenant. So look at the theme, look at how they work together, collaboration.
Most definitely. And that's my second most favorite word is collaboration. I'd like to think that my whole life is has grown through collaboration. So what about effective tenant incentive? We touched on that.
We did both sides of the fence here. So make sure it's working for your tenant and being very conscious that whatever you're doing is not having a detrimental effect on the value of your property. So maintaining the good solid lease terms and dollar figures while we can look at what the tenant needs, not what we think they need, have those conversations around what they actually need, and then be able to work a way that it works collectively, both for yourself and for your tenant as well, whether it be signage or whether it be a rent-free period, or it might be a portion of fit out. It might be a mix of all of them.
And I love your story about how you worked with your tenant with doing those incremental increases slowly, growing and helping them get used to paying their rentals. Very important, conditioning.
Absolutely.
And also adapting to market trends. So those are the changes, the market changes.
Be proactive. Don't ever sit there and think that the market's not going to change. And I say sometimes you might want to be the change yourself. Okay. So if we're looking at an area saying, well, how could I do this differently? What can I bring into an area? What can I contribute to a town or a region if I do this a little bit differently? So be proactive. Also, let's be very real about technology. It's there. It's not going anywhere. We may as well use it. We really seriously may as well jump on and use it to all of our benefits. Don't overcapitalize on your renovations. Be smart about what you're doing. Again, it's the relationships. It's working with your tenants. Brand well, but look at what you're branding for and who you're branding to. There's no point in getting excited about a color and a name and then it not mixing in well with your area demographic dynamic or the greater reach for that matter either. And as far as that goes, I can just say, guys, council, go and speak to them, actually build a relationship with your economic department and look at the trends that they are predicting in their area and then start looking at how you can meet some of them as well.
And that is gold. I think that is absolutely gold. Work with your councils. So we've got a QR code that if anybody wants a little bit more information, they can click on the code. You can get hold of Melissa. We're going to put all Melissa's details on the site. If anybody would like to know more about Melissa and what she's doing, like I said, Melissa, your specialty is more developing as well as commercial, isn't it?
It is. I love commercial. I love commercial industrial, and I do love getting in from the very standing start. But there's something about old buildings. It's one of those things, and I know we were chatting earlier, it's very hard to sit and do nothing. Sometimes I say I wish I'd never seen it because I'm busy. But yeah, commercials, it just is a great love that I have, and probably more so because I've been in business for a long time. But yes, development is a very big part of what I do these days.
Yeah, and they kind of when you get into the space of uplifting property, especially in industrial, that developing background most certainly does help a huge amount.
And it also development allows us to work with the environmental aspects of things and start getting into how we can do things a little bit better moving forward. So it allows us to take a deeper dive into how we can contribute back into regions and things like this as well. So ticks a few other boxes.
It most certainly does. I think I kind of feel as if I could carry on speaking to you for another 4 hours. We're just going to have to get you on again.
I'd love to. I'd be happy to come on again and have a chat with you again, Mish. It's been an absolute pleasure. You are an amazing person. So thank you so much for inviting me along. It's been an absolute joy.
And thank you. Likewise, it's been eye-opening. It's been an absolute mind-blowing session with you. You're awesome at what you do. So thank you so much. And I really, really mean it from my entire team. Thank you so much for joining us today on this chat.